Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today we're going to be talking about RNG, and in particular the role that it plays in this game and how you can beat it, because a lot of times we say, oh, just wait for good RNG, or you need some good RNG to do this. Like, what is that? How do you even get good RNG? What does good RNG look like? We're going to talk about that. I'm going to tell you guys the strategies and, the tips and tricks to beating it, because it is possible to beat RNG. It just takes a little bit more than just, praying to, as we say, RNGs us. So if you guys want to go ahead and like and subscribe, comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Of course, let's give a massive shout out to the channel members for all they do to support this channel. Again, if you're ever interested in joining, that link is always down below. These guys get roster reviews, advice, anything they want. Like, even if I'm not streaming and you want a roster review, let me know. We can do that. I'll do it through like a Discord DM. You just got to drop your code, kind of tell me what you're looking for. So again, guys, like, subscribe, comment. Let's get into the video. Let's talk about this. So, RNG, what is it? Well, the easiest way to say what RNG is kind of defining it is it's stuff that's out of your control, or it's luck, right? It's the stuff in this game that you have zero control over. Think about Jabba's ultimate ability for a second. When you're facing another Jabba the Hutt, who that Jabba decides to target with the Rancor is completely out of your control. There's nothing you can do. He can ignore taunt. He dispels stealth. So everybody is open game for Jabba to eat. He could eat your Galactic Legend, which is best case scenario. He could eat your Commander Tano, one of the worst things he could do. He could eat your, Padme or General, he could eat whoever he wants. And so because of that, it's out of your control. It's RNG. So depending on who he eats, that can be good or bad for your team. Or it's always bad, I should say, but I guess the only time it's good is if he eats your Galactic Legend, and even then it's still not good because, other bad things happen, but you get the concept that it's out of your control. It's luck, right? And I have this saying, I love saying it, where it's skill when luck becomes a habit. And I mean, it's such a cocky thing to say. And in some aspects, I will say it is true. There is an air to truth about that. The luckier you get in this game, oftentimes the more skill that there was, and you just don't see it. Let me show you an example real quick, and then we're going to get into how to beat these things. So I want to show you this mod on Skiffguard Lando here. So this mod has 21 speed on 5 speed rolls, right? So it's not that great, especially when you compare this one to General Skywalker, where he's got 4 speed rolls with the same amount of speed. And in fact, if I went up to, these mods here, look at that, same amount of rolls, right? Or one less roll, and more speed. Look at this, more speed with less rolls. So less rolls, how does that happen? It's RNG, right? Like, you could say, oh, well, that mod started with a lower base, but it's random as to how those, which levels you get on this mod, right? Like, you look, these numbers in here, the average slice quality is 37, whereas you go to this Maul one and the average is 85. So again, it's random. It's RNG. You can't control it. But as I say, it's skill when luck becomes a habit, and here's how you can make luck a habit in this game. I guess before we get into that, we got to talk about the kinds of RNG that exist. There's 2 kinds. There's the RNG you get when you're playing a battle. Like I explained with Jabba the Hutt, who he targets with his ultimate ability, that's RNG. When you think about, going into battle against, say, a Maul, who he targets with his cooldown increase ability, right? When he's got 5 stacks, you can increase somebody's cooldowns by 2. Who he targets with that, he can ignore taunt, so it's fair game. He can target, and remember, this excludes Galactic Legends, right? So if you're going up against Lord Vader, you have your Jedi Master Luke, and he targets your Jedi Master Luke, that's perfect case scenario, right? You love that. He targets your Jedi Knight Luke, that's the second best scenario. He targets your Jedi Knight Revan or your Shock T, and you're like, gosh, dang it, like that sucks. So again, RNG as to how that plays out. Admiral Piet, think of your Executor mirror match. Which Executor goes first? Well, if you're both the same speed, it's a coin flip, right? It's RNG. It's luck of who goes first. Think of Darth Vader even with his culling blade. If that culling blade doesn't critically hit, right? RNG. Like, you can say, oh, well, there's ways to beat that. We'll get into that. And then finally, like Rebel Officer Leia Organa. She's a perfect example of RNG, right? This deal physical damage 10 times to random enemies. Enemies struck more than once suffer ability block for 1 turn. So this is literally like, hey, we're gonna deal damage to 10 random targets. Like, that's that. And this ability is way more potent the less enemies there are because everybody's taking more damage. But again, another perfect example of RNG, like who does that actually hit? So the next way that RNG happens is when you're farming resources. Shards, mods, gear, all of those things kind of come into play and say, hey, there's RNG there. What's the drop rate going to be? Is it showing up in the store today or not? So we're going to get into all of those things and talk about how to beat them, right? Finally. So higher relic levels, let's start. So with higher relics, this is in battles. If you have higher relics, you have a better chance of winning those where there's an RNG element. Think of Fennec beating Lord Vader. If you have a higher relic Fennec or higher relic characters, they can take a better punishment, right? If something maybe goes awry, they can survive longer. They can, beat that team. Similar with Starkiller versus Rey or other teams. If your Starkiller has higher relics on him, he's dealing more damage. It's far easier to win those fights. Think of using Dark Trooper in your Imperial Troopers. If your Dark Trooper's higher relic levels, he's dealing more damage, and that means that you're relying less on him constantly having to assist. Think about when you're using Admiral Piet, you put that ability on him, so that way you always call Dark Trooper to assist. The next one's random, right? When it, like Piet's ability here, it says, call another random Empire ally to assist. Allies with inevitable failure are called to assist. So that random ally could be Dark Trooper, and then he gets to go again because he's, has inevitable failure on him right here, right? So again, just trying to show you the different, that if you have a higher relic level, you don't necessarily need Dark Trooper to double tap all the time. Think of your Wampa. The higher relics on your Wampa, the better chance you have of beating some of those higher teams, whether that's Iden or Starkiller. Those are the kinds of things that he can do with higher relics. And then finally, even like Sith Assassin, just, to throw ships back in the fray here. You have a higher relic Sith Assassin, you're able to turn the tide of that Leviathan mirror match because your Sith Assassin went first, juice your team and get rolling. Next is modding. Modding is extremely important to beating RNG. The better modded your team is, the more likely that RNG tips in your favor or that you can overcome the bad stuff. Think about your Commander Luke Skywalker here. If your Commander Luke is modded for tenacity, so that way he doesn't get stunned, doesn't get dazed by certain abilities, it makes it far harder to counter him. Think, they bring Iden against your Commander Luke, and you're able to get some plays off. Now that's normally a pretty easy battle, but maybe a better example would be General Grievous. General Grievous is a soft counter to Commander Luke Skywalker, but if you mod your Commander Luke for tenacity, General Grievous isn't landing ability block, and that team falls apart. So the better modded you are, right, the better chance you have of overcoming any kind of that RNG, or you could use Commander Luke to beat, Grievous, whatever the case is. Think about your, Royal Guard. If you mod your Royal Guard properly, it's going to leave out, that, hey, if they, like, zerg down your Royal Guard, it's a lot harder to do that. That RNG of, they, dropped him, and then this happened, that happened, right? Jedi Master Luke dealing more damage with his abilities, on his, Inherited Teachings, right? There's a lot of fights that I've lost with Jedi Master Luke, and a lot of fights that I've won with Jedi Master Luke, where my relic level played a role. My modding played a role, that because I have as much protection as I do on him, I'm able to beat certain teams that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to beat. This is particularly relevant against Jedi Master Kenobi. The more protection you have, the more damage you're able to do to get through that Kenobi, the better off you are. And then finally, there's strategy and skill. And I put these together in the same line, but they're two different things. Strategy is you're using a specific strategy that, think of using the, think of countering the Leviathan with Thrawn. There's a strategy to that. It takes a strategy, right? Of, okay, I'm going to start with the Scythe, Imperial TIE Fighter, and Darth Vader's ship. And then my first reinforcement is going to be Iden Versio. And then my next reinforcement is the second sister. So much of that battle is RNG. What happens if this happens, that happens? Well, the strategy shows you how to do it. Skill is, hey, in Phil's video, Iden dodged 5 times and she only dodged 4 in mine. And now my second sister died when she came out of reinforcements instead of being alive. It's going to take skill on your end to win that fight. Think of the Rey Tier 6 event, one of the harder Galactic Legend events. You can follow my strategy guide. You can follow, Fatal or Arnold or Bit Dynasty, whoever has one. You can follow anybody's strategy guide. But the minute that your run deviates any little bit from the guide that you're watching, it's going to take your skill to finish it off. Sometimes it takes a lot of skill, sometimes it doesn't take much at all, right? That strategy and skill oftentimes are, we think of them the same way, and they're not. They're very different. Strategies, you know how to beat this team. I know to, do this and this. Think about taking the finalizer up against the executor. If you just do that without a strategy, you're going to lose every single time. You have the strategy, you could still lose unless you have the skill for when things go wrong. Maybe Houndstooth doesn't get ability blocked, or the stun doesn't land, or it gets taunt off, or somebody dodges. Being able to still win those fights is what takes skill. And sometimes it just doesn't happen, right? You're going to lose sometimes. But to beat the RNG, you need that strategy and your skill on top of it. And again, depending on if you get good or bad luck, it takes, more of the strategy, or that, you can't make a misplay, right? That's like on the strategy side. Or takes on the skill side that you've got to do things that the strategy guide wasn't showing you. So that's battles, guys, right? Again, it is possible to beat the RNG. We do it all the time. Think about how many times, you guys have watched me do something and you're like, wow, that was, and I'm like, man, I was really lucky, or that was some good RNG there. Or like, man, that was bad RNG and we somehow got through. Like, strategy and skill, guys. It's, combined with, I've got the good modding, and I don't have good relics all the time, but they would help alleviate a lot of the RNG that sometimes we're reliant on. Now, what about resource farming? Going back up here. Resource farming is very different because you can't, higher relics and modding don't really play a role. So the first thing that plays a role is consistency. You've got to be consistent with your farming. It's not about, you can't just sit there and say, I'm going to farm mods one time a day. Or I'm only going to farm mods one day out of the year. No, you do it every single day. You got to be consistent. The more consistent you are, the more likely you are to beat the RNG or beat the system. You'll never beat RNG. But you'll win, right? You'll win. You'll be successful because you're consistent. A good example, shards. You're not just farming a shard like I'm going to do one roll a day, right? You're doing 5 battles a day or 10 battles a day, knowing that eventually that consistency is going to get you over the line, that you're going to earn 2 shards a day, 3 shards a day, and eventually you're going to get that character, right? That's the, consistency is so incredibly important with anything you're doing, gear, mods, character shards. If you're not consistently trying to do better or farming something, you're not going to be as successful in this game. Think about my mods. My mods, I'm consistently farming them, right? I've never stopped it. I'm always trying to improve my mods, and by that consistency, I've gotten better and better. And then it's going to take strategy, right? I want to make sure I had strategy. Strategy's still involved in farming, just it's very different than in battles. With battles, it's like, hey, do this, do this, do this. The strategy to farming shards could be a bit different. Let's start with Moff Gideon, for example. Moff Gideon has 2 farming locations. You could get him on a hard node, or you can get him in the cantina. Both of them are on the lower energy side. The cantina will get you there significantly faster. Significantly faster to get him out of the cantina than to get him via the hard node. But the cantina could, there's other things to get in cantina. There's other characters that don't have hard nodes who are in the cantina, or think of your signal data or ships. There are things in cantina that aren't anywhere else, where he's got 2 locations. So it takes some strategy to understand what are your current needs. Do you just need Moff Gideon today? If you need him, if you need him in, they come out with a, Galactic Legend Mando or Bo-Katan, or come out with a new character, or Grand Admiral Thrawn gets a Galactic Legend, and you need Gideon. Well, a lot of players would probably shoot right towards the cantina battles because that's the fastest way to get him. But strategy would say, hey, maybe I'm going to just farm this guy on the side, knowing I may eventually need him, and I can put him in a hard node, spending 60 energy a day. Not a big deal. Again, that's strategy. Understanding when to farm something versus the other. Like if you're in a pinch, you need him, hey, then you go to the cantina. Otherwise, the hard node's your better option. Similar situation with your, Kyratex. My strategy is always to farm shock prods via the node. The node here, again, I've talked about this. I've beat it to a dead horse. This node is the most important node in the game, in my opinion, because it gets you Kyratech and Bronzium wiring. I have never had to purchase Bronzium wiring. I've never been low on Bronzium wiring because of how often I farm this node. I go crazy on this node. This is where the majority of my energy goes, is right here. and that's it. On the flip side, my computers, I only ever purchase these with currencies. Now, not Get 3, but you can purchase these with your Grand Arena currency, your Get 2, Guild Event currency, 2 currencies. By doing that with this piece, you'll actually be able to maintain similar numbers. Now, you do, look, I've got 544 of these, and I've got 609 of these, so it's actually pretty close. You do need more shock prods. That is a known thing, right? You do need more shock prods, but being able to keep some parity between these by farming these every day and buying these out of the store when I have the currency is a great strategy, right? And that's a really big part of your balance. And then finally, the other part of the strategy, I'd say, is knowing how to balance your character shard farming with your gear. Now, as you progress in the game, as you get later on in the game, I recommend spending anywhere from 300 to 380 regular energy a day on shards. And everything else goes to gear. The reason I say that is because your regular energy is one of the biggest, that's the only way to get that's the most consistent way to get Chirotech, right? You need that consistency to your Chirotech. So, but you also can't ignore shards. You need to constantly be building things. So by trying to say the 300 to 380 energy, again, that strategy allows you that you could be farming 5 characters on 60 energy nodes. Heck, you could be, on 12 energy nodes. You could be farming 6 characters on 60 energy nodes and still stay within that range. On the flip side, you could be farming 3 characters on 20 energy nodes and 1 on an 80 energy node and spend 380 energy. You don't compare it by the number of characters, you just compare it in terms of energy. And if you do that, you're going to be much more successful, I feel, and having that strategy has paid off for me. Early on in the game, I want to just make sure I say this, but early on in the game, character shards should always win out because you do naturally accumulate gear. It's as you get later in the road where you need to start balancing that Chirotech with your character shards because you've continually increased your shards across the board. And then finally, the last way to beat, just buy it. Just buy it. To beat the RNG, buy it. Just surpass it. Just go and buy the stuff. Go buy the Lightspeed bundles, the Hyperdrive bundle. There's some ways even spending money that you can't escape RNG. Think of the, we gotta love the whale packs here, right? For the comeuppance. Look at this. You can have a 0.1% chance for getting 330 blueprints. This is pure RNG at its finest, right? But again, you're guaranteeing yourself shards here. This isn't nearly as good. You think it's way better to at least take advantage of this via the Galactic Chase right now. But that ship is going to sit in there for a while, and for a lot of players, it's going to sit in there for a month. A lot of players will look at that in a month, in a week or two's time, and they're going to say, look at me. I'm not going to get this ship 7-star in this GC. I just have this Galactic Chase. I've not got the RNG, and it's going to take me a while to finish off this ship. I got it to 5-star. That's good enough for what I need it for, right? It'll come in. I really wish I could have got this to 7-star, but it's just been not had good RNG, right? I just haven't got the drops that I wanted. Didn't hoard quite as much energy, but even still, it's just been a real big struggle for me. Had a lot of runs of just 2 shard drops. It's been pretty brutal, not gonna lie. But how could I have beat that? Well, I could just go buy it, right? I'd just be willing to spend more and say, you know what? I'm not even gonna play this stupid event. I'm just gonna go buy this ship. So that's the last way to do it, right? The last way, resource farming, you want to beat it, just go buy it, right? Just buy it. So with all that said, guys, RNG, luck, it is a big part of this game. You would be lying to yourself if you didn't admit that luck played a huge role in this game. And there's so many more examples. I just picked out a couple that I think are very relevant and kind of gave you the framework for beating it. So again, in your battles, you want to focus on having higher relics. You want to focus on having good mods and then combining that strategy and skill to get the job done. You don't just want to go into a fight and try and beat, Galactic Legends Ray with the Bad Batch and get lucky, right? That's just begging for disaster. I think it was a soft counter at one point, but it's really not now. No, have the right strategy to go beat that team, right? And then you are going to need skill on top of that because more than likely your strategy is not going to follow step by step with whatever the guide you're following is because, again, this game is random. So that's the end of the video, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. Again, like, subscribe, comment. I love all of you. May the force be with you, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.